It's easy to think of energy as your physical energy. So when you feel tired, you say, oh, I don't have any energy. And when you feel like you could run along the beach and you can swim for hours and you can bound around or you can work all day without getting tired, you say, I have lots of energy. But your energy is so much more than that. Your energy is your capacity. So, for example, when you have more energy, you don't need to do nearly so much and you can produce far more. Having more energy means you're able to manage or have more people helping you and working with you. Having more energy means essentially that it takes less effort to produce more result. And that is unlimited in the extent to which it's true. We tend not to think of energy like that. We tend still to think of energy as this very physical thing. Your energy is essentially your blueprint. So it's the patterning or the coding behind your physical existence. If you imagine everything is made of energy, everything is energy in the entire universe. And the physical form that we see is like the front end of the projection, so to speak. It's the right on the cutting edge of existence. It's the bit on the edge, but behind it, there are so many workings behind it. It's like the picture that you can see on your screen now. That's not the real me. It's a projection of me. And it's a projection that's possible because of all kinds of wires and wireless connections and technology, and then pieces of hardware like your computer and my computer and servers somewhere. And then there's the real me somewhere here, long way behind it, reaching the real you a long way behind it. So the picture that you see on the screen is like a projection that comes from a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes. So your physical experience, your physical body, and what you see in the world, this 3D reality that we live in, is just like the projection of so much that lies behind it. And it's what lies behind it that determines what shows up in that projection. But we tend to think that projection is all there is. That's sort of our base assumption on the whole. That's the way we've been educated, is to look at 3D reality, look at the evidence of 3D reality. And from there, you can read everything. Actually, from there, what you read from the evidence of 3D reality is a very limited reading, because from 3D reality, it's very difficult to see the future. It's very difficult to see the past. So the past gets contained in books and films and stories. So projections of the projection, and the future, if it's contained at all, is contained in even more vague projections of possible projections. And yet within the energy field, the energy that's behind those projections, all of the past still exists. Everything that has ever happened is contained within the energy field. It doesn't die, it doesn't go away. And literally, for example, everything that's happened in this place where I'm sitting or where you're sitting, it's like the entire history of that little space is actually contained in the energy field. And that helps us to understand why you can walk into a place and it has an atmosphere that's been built through all the things that have happened in that space. It's why you can walk into a place in nature, perhaps where there's been a battle in the past. And if you're very sensitive, it can make you feel really uncomfortable. It can even really disturb people profoundly if they're highly, highly sensitive, because the history of that place is contained in the energy field, although it's been completely wiped off the projection, so to speak, the 3D reality, because the battle scene is gone and the flowers are growing again and there's no mud and so on and so forth. So It's important for us to realize that what we take to be reality is one tiny slice of it. It's useful. It has its validity, it has its place, but it's very important to understand what energy really is. And energy is all the patterning behind that is much, much richer than that physical reality, because the energy contains all the potential of the future. And it contains all the past, it contains all the patterns, all the possible patterns. It also contains essentially the blueprint of your body. And that blueprint can be very flexible, because with every thought that you have, you influence the blueprints that's being projected through to you. But that energy also contains the optimal blueprints. So it can contain the blueprint of where you are now, and that is the coding of your current body and everything that happens. It's also the blueprint for your life. It's the coding of all the things that happen in your life. But it also contains the blueprint or the template of your optimal body. Also a whole range of suboptimal bodies, anything that you can imagine, and also a lot that you can't possibly imagine, is all contained within that energy field. And so when you have a thought of, my body is getting older, you link into a piece of coding. It's like you select a piece of coding and you make it just a little tiny bit more real. When you link into your optimal template, your optimal body, or your original template, your original body, how you were originally designed, let's say, that thought influences the energy that is behind your physical existence. And it changes a tiny little bit what you get to experience in your physical reality. And so there's a kind of feedback system between us in the physical. So our thoughts and our feelings are the kind of early stage, or early isn't the right word. They link us into the energy. The physical part of our existence is the part that's most formed and most difficult to influence in the now. It's like you have to influence that into the future. It's much easier to influence the future of your physical form than it is to influence what's currently happening, because it's already formed. Your thoughts are much more energetic. Your thought doesn't have a physical reality yet. So it kind of links you into that energy, that whole field of energy that lies behind the physical reality, as do your feelings. So they're kind of like your bridge into that whole world of energy, as is your imagination, and as is your experience when you enter deeper states of being. So you can enter a state where you're much more aware, much more alert to energy. And you can have visions, for example, which may be very accurate visions. You can tap into information psychically. You can read things. You can have a kind of dream state experience that influences reality, because it connects you into that energy world. But it's in the energy world that things are really happening. It's much more alive in there. We also have many senses that that are more alive when we're young. When we're very young, we have many senses that are alive that gradually get shut down by the way that we educate children and bring them up, because we favor certain senses very strongly. So we favor the 5 senses that we've labeled, the senses that connect you with and enable you to experience that 3D reality, that what's happening in time and space. But we've largely ignored many of the other senses that enable you to sense what's going on in the non-physical space. but give us our intuition, give us our subtle sense, enable us to sense when there's danger, enable us often to move out of danger without even knowing that the danger was there. They enable us to communicate with other people at subtle levels and to communicate with our environment at subtle levels. They enable us to actually influence our environment much more than we realize. But those subtle senses also enable us to communicate with and connect with all the what we call living parts of our environment, like the plants and the trees and the animals. The science is showing more and more now that there is a constant feedback going on between all different forms of life. So I read something the other day where, for example, if a plant lacks energy, it can absorb energy from other plants around it. It's like it can literally eat the energy of other plants, even if it's not given the nutrition that it needs. And human beings also have the ability to receive a lot of what we need at an intangible level physically, but it is tangible if you've cultivated those subtle senses. So what that's saying is that there is far more to us than we see at first sight. And the more you cultivate your energy, you're not just cultivating your physical battery. You're cultivating the richness of your potential. You're cultivating all these subtle senses that enable you to read life in a much richer way than if you just stick with the 5 physical senses. And you're enabling a subtle communication between you and people and your environment, both the alive environment and what we tend to think of as the not so alive environment, the machines, the man-made things. They're also alive. They're also energy. They're also moving under a microscope. Everything is alive, in fact. Again, that's something we don't tend to see because we focus on a more static aspect of that reality. But there is constant communication between you and everything that is going on. And so when you realize this, you begin to understand what energy really is. And of course, everything is made of energy. So the fact that you're made of energy and the physical space that appears empty is made of energy. And then the physical things, objects that occupy that space, that take up some space, a tiny bit of space, relatively speaking, within the space, they are all part of that energy. And therefore you are connected, literally, like I want to say physically connected, let's say energetically connected with all of it, with the entire universe. And you can never, ever be separated from any part of it. But the projection part of it, that part that's on the leading edge, and that's an important part of it because that's where we get to have this very special experience of being human. That part that's on the leading edge can experience that it's not connected with all of it. And it can experience that it is connected with all of it. And so we can have the experience of being little blobs of physical material floating around in this great big open space, or we can experience ourselves as being intrinsically deeply connected with the entire universe. And both of those experiences are really important, to be able to feel that uniqueness and to be able to feel that deep connection, connectedness with all of life. And so when you cultivate your energy, you get to experience yourself and your uniqueness more fully and more richly because you see so much more of what lies behind your physical appearance. And at the same time, you get to experience yourself as much more connected with all of the rest of life because through the cultivation of all those subtle senses, you begin to be much more aware of all of the rest of life. You're more aware. You have the ability to sense that connection. And it's a very tangible sensation. It can make you feel at home. It can make you feel that you belong. It literally makes you feel connected instead of feeling disconnected. So where does relaxation come into all of this? Fundamentally, as a human being, in this physical projection, this part of life through which we experience ourselves when we're in this human form, our ability to connect with all of that potential that I'm describing that's contained within the energy field is determined by our thoughts and our feelings. And our thoughts and our feelings are very much influenced by all those senses that I talked about. So when I talk about feelings now, I'm including the subtle senses. Many of us, through our education and upbringing and culture, have learned to shut off all those senses. So we're operating on a very limited number of senses. And that limits our experience. Many of us have learned to get very stressed about things, so we're very tense about things. When we're tense, we shrink ourselves. We contract our muscles. We contract our thoughts. We can only see all the things that are going to go wrong. We don't see possibilities anymore. So we are literally contracted at the thought level. We're contracted at the feeling level. We feel shrunken. We try to hold on to ourselves. We squeeze. We contract at the feeling level, and we contract at the physical level. It also means that we contract at the energy level. And so when you relax, your muscles expand, your feelings expand. It's like you literally allow more feelings to be present. Your thoughts expand. You start to be able to see more possibilities. What actually happens when you relax is that it opens up the connection between that physical part of you and that whole world of energy that you're a part of. So it enables more flow between those worlds. So there's the flow of your thoughts and feelings that influence the energy that you receive. And then there's the flow of energy into your system. And that flow of energy literally can flood you with a whole lot of that energy that makes you feel different. And so there's a very dynamic loop here between that physical part of you that thinks and feels and the energy world that you're a part of. And when you can't relax, when you're very tense, when you're very stressed, you limit your feedback. You limit your ability to receive from that energy world. So you limit the amount of energy that's capable of flowing through you because you limit your capacity. And you limit the flow of it. Now, when you relax, you start to feel better because you've got more energy flowing through you. When you feel better, the signals that you send to that energy world are signals that are essentially requesting better energy. And so there's a double positive loop here, that you're more relaxed, and so you feel better. You have more positive thoughts, and so it's like the energy that you attract, or the energy that you're selecting, comes into you, and it enhances that positivity that you're already feeling. Of course, the same thing happens on the negative side when you're very tense. You send very limiting thoughts out into that energy field. That's the way you connect with it. And so you select a much more limited pattern of energy that's enabled to flow through you. So relaxation is a double positive experience. It opens you up to be more receptive to energy. And by being more receptive to energy, you feel more positive, and that opens you up to be more receptive to energy. And so relaxation lies at the root of growing every level of your capacity. Because when you're more receptive to energy, you are literally in touch with more of your potential, more of the possibility for you. And so more is possible. And then when you experience that, you feel good about yourself. And so you want more. And so you make bigger choices. You don't limit yourself. You don't shrink yourself. You don't feel that you can't. And there's a virtuous loop in that, which expands gradually the more you're able to relax. So it is a very, very fundamental practice or habit that enables your connection, the connection between the physical you and the energy world, to be more open. And therefore, it enables you to experience more of who you can be. And it becomes absolutely the foundation then of everything. It's not the only thing, but it's the foundation. Without the relaxation, everything else becomes meaningless. So the relaxation is always, always important. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whoever you are, it enables more flow of energy. And it's a virtuous cycle.